call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 6 of the Standing Committee on Science and Research. Pursuant to the motion of the House of June 18, the motion of September 17, 2025, the committee is meeting to study the impact of the criteria for awarding federal funding on research excellence in Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Pursuant to the standing orders, members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I think everyone is in person today. Before we continue, I would ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. You will also notice a QR code on the card, which links to a short awareness video. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses today and all the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. I would like to welcome our witnesses. Today, we have 3 organizations for this panel. So the first one is Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, being represented by Dr. Ted Hewitt, the President, Dr. Valerie Laflamme, Associate Vice President, Tri-Agency Institutional Programs Secretariat. The next organization is Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, being represented by Anne-Marie Thompson, Vice President, Research Grants and Scholarships Directorate. Also, we have Marcel Turcotte, Vice President, Strategic, Corporate and Public Affairs. And the third organization is Canadian Institutes of Health Research, represented by Dr. Paul Hebert, the President, and also Jeff Moore, Associate Vice President, Government and External Relations. All the 3 organizations will get 5 minutes for the opening remarks, and we will start that with Dr. Ted Hewitt. You will have the floor for 5 minutes, and then after that we will go to the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, and finally the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. So, Dr. Hewitt, the floor is yours. You can begin. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, for inviting me to speak on today's critically important topic. I'm here on behalf, as you said, of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, SHRC for short, and we are the federal funding agency that supports research and research training in disciplines related to social sciences and humanities, as well as advancing partnerships and initiatives that help communities, businesses, and governments apply research knowledge and insights to innovate and improve the lives of Canadians. Within the social sciences and humanities specifically, SHRC invests about $570 million annually in research and research training for students and postdoctoral fellows. This research explores all aspects of human thought and behavior. It builds understanding of people and their past, present, and future experiences to strengthen society, build prosperity, and improve lives. The research we support covers a wide array of disciplines, from business, economics, and law to philosophy, history, literature, among many others, and contributes to Canada's economic, cultural, social, technological, and environmental well-being. Tout comme les membres de la population canadienne, les travaux de recherche...
Like the members of the Canadian population, the work that's funded by SHRC are very varied, and they cover many issues that are important for the community, for all regions, all sectors.
Research grants and fellowships are awarded through an independent merit review process designed to ensure the highest standards of excellence and impartiality. This process is undertaken in accordance with international standards that are globally recognized as the most transparent, in-depth, and effective way to allocate public research funds. Each year, merit review committees made up of volunteer university, college, and community-based experts from Canada and around the world evaluate thousands of research proposals and make recommendations about which projects to fund. Les évaluations sont toujours effectuées en fonction.
The evaluations are always assessed against the objectives of particular funding opportunity. But generally, reviewers evaluate the challenge outlined in the application, the plan to achieve excellence, and the expertise needed to succeed, which the applicant has detailed. In addition, applicants must also demonstrate the impact of the proposed research for Canadians.
Is not static, I need to emphasize. Over its 5 decades, SSHRC has recognized and highlighted, often in collaboration with our fellow research funding agencies, components that define research excellence and good research practices. Such guidelines include those on the responsible conduct of research and on the merit review of Indigenous research. Like many agencies worldwide, we also provide guidelines on the use of broadly recognized principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion to promote research excellence through inclusion of the broadest possible array of human perspectives in research design and practice. Further, SSHRC is involved in several international initiatives in adopting best practices in the assessment of scholarly research and seeking ways to modernize and remain at the forefront of applying rigorous scientific methods to improve the way we fund, practice, evaluate, and communicate research. Tandis que le Canada fait face à de nombreux défis.
As Canada faces many daunting challenges in a rapidly changing world, it's more important than ever for us to invest in a vibrant research ecosystem that reflects the broad diversity of our country and can offer made-in-Canada solutions for us all. And SSHRC remains steadfast in its commitment to fueling the research excellent across all disciplines needed for Canada to thrive.
Forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Hewitt. And with that, now we will proceed to Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. And Ms. Thompson, you have 5 minutes for the opening remarks. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm here today representing the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. And on behalf of NSERC President Alejandro Edem, who is abroad on work-related travel, I am pleased to provide remarks for your important study. Chaque année, le SRSR investit plus de
Every year, NSERC invests over $1.4 billion each year in natural sciences and engineering research in Canada to deliver impact locally, nationally, and globally. These investments build a national knowledge base in the natural sciences and engineering through broad-based discovery-oriented research at Canada's world-class universities and colleges. This research catalyzes the development of highly qualified research professionals to create talent that innovative organizations need, creating over 35,000 training opportunities annually, with over 83% of trainees going on to work in either research and development or research following the completion of their degrees. Canada is certainly well regarded by its peers internationally for supporting research excellence. Since 2015, 3 NSERC-supported researchers based in Canada have won Nobel Prizes in physics.
Investments also power industry partnerships with universities and colleges, creating a culture of academic entrepreneurialism and connecting the creators and users of discovery research. Over 2,500 partners participate in NSERC projects each year, most from industry, and 91% report benefits from the collaboration. In 2023-24, these collaborations attracted $356 million in partner contributions. NSERC funding is awarded following competitive and independent merit review by Canadian and international experts. The process evaluates proposals based on the applicant's demonstration of producing meaningful and impactful research, on the originality and proposed use of the research, as well as on the quality of training and mentoring provided. As funders, We recognize the need for continual modernization to stay relevant within the research enterprise. Continuous reflection and improvement in assessing research quality and impact is a consistent theme at NSERC. For example, NSERC is a signatory to DORA, the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment. NSERC, along with SSHRC and CIHR, are also implementing the Tri-Agency EDI Action Plan, recognizing that equity, diversity, and inclusion are essential to research quality and impact. Conformément à ces engagements, le CRSN...
In line with these commitments, NSERC released revised guidelines in 2022 to encourage reviewers and applicants and candidates to consider a more comprehensive range of contributions to research, training, and mentoring. NSERC asks reviewers to recognize that research contributions can take many forms: publications, shared data sets, public engagement or outreach, technology licensing. All of these contributions have a positive effect on society and enhance Canada's research ecosystem. Each program has its objectives, and we approach the evaluations and proposals in this way.
The growth of Canada's research enterprise. We continue to modernize programming and evaluation processes to deliver the greatest benefits for Canadians. Merci de m'avoir donné la parole aujourd'hui. Ce sera un plaisir de...
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I look forward to answering any questions you may have and be happy to give you more examples of the work NSERC is doing to promote research excellence in Canada.
And we will now proceed to Canadian Institutes of Health Research, and I will give the floor to Dr. Hebert, the President of the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. The floor is yours. You will have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Madame la Présidente, merci
Madam
pour la...
Chair, thank you for the invitation to appear before your committee. It's a pleasure for me to be here for the first time as President of the Canadian Institutes of Health Research. Research excellence is an issue close to my heart and fundamental to CIHR's work. 9 months ago, I accepted to become the president of CIHR because I believe profoundly in its mission, which is the improvement of health, well-being, and prosperity of Canadians through research excellence. As a clinician researcher for 33 years, I have seen firsthand how research can transform lives and health systems.
Over my lifetime. This is quite personal to me. I lost my first wife to breast cancer. During her battle, turns out, a new class of anti-estrogen medications called aromatase inhibitors became available just when she needed them. Thanks in part to Canadian excellent research, these treatments gave her more time and gave our 10-year-old daughter at the time 8 more years with her mother. We now are at a critical moment in human history where scientific discoveries will transform our daily lives. 25 years ago, when CIHR was created, Canadian scientists joined the Human Genome Project. It took thousands of scientists and billions of dollars to map just one genome. Today, not only can we map a whole genome over a weekend with less than $100, we can now edit that genome and remove disease-causing sequences using gene editing technologies called CRISPR-Cas9, to potentially cure diseases, including things like sickle cell disease and cystic fibrosis. This means we now have the power to transform life. Imagine now if we couple this foundational transformation in human biology with artificial intelligence. In health and in life science, this powerful combination will accelerate discovery at unfathomable rates. These potential forces will generate new foundational and fundamental insights and affect health and healthcare, as well as all aspects of our social fabric. This convergence will require all of society, including our best scientists, to be at the forefront of this new revolution. The question is whether we are ready to act boldly and together. Are we willing and ready to overcome the barriers and unlock the power of our health data, from our genome to health records to serve the public good? Are we ready as a country to invest in being bold leaders, because Canada has some of the best scientists in the world, whether they're from my two other agencies or our own and we fund. But because Canada has some of our best scientists, we can now begin, because Canada has some of the world's best scientists, I believe we can move ahead and remain global leaders. However, we are sadly falling behind. As the global research landscape explodes, there's a clear imperative to strengthen Canada's science, to grow, and this is to grow our economy as well as protect our sovereignty and our security. My vision of research excellence is captured in 3 words: collaboration for impact. For me, it means fostering partnerships, building problem-focused networks, consortia across sectors and jurisdictions that integrate diverse disciplines and perspectives to tackle major social problems, societal problems, affecting all of us, including the most vulnerable. This also means that equity must be a foundational principle. Without enabling all Canadians to benefit from our many discoveries, we risk tearing at Canada's social fabric, as well as worsen health and economic outcomes. Research excellence alone will not suffice. CIHR has the bold ambition and the funding approaches to continue supporting research excellence. We have a discovery fund which supports the best and most original of our science, and a mission-driven funds, many mission-driven funds, which target priority areas like primary care and mental health, brain health, pandemics, and the opioid crisis. Les deux approches reposent sur une évaluation rigoureuse, comme vous avez entendu de mes collègues, par des comités de pairs.
Both approaches rely on rigorous peer review in accordance with international standards. As you've heard my colleagues say, this is how we produce impactful research that continues to change lives. At this pivotal moment, we must not only provide all necessary resources to our top scientists, but also improve the commercialization of discoveries made right here in Canada. Otherwise, we risk enriching other countries instead of our own, as was the case with mRNA vaccines and Ozempic. In summary, through our unwavering commitment to excellence, CIHR aims to maximize the impact of research on the health, well-being, and economic prosperity of Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Thank you. I would be pleased to answer your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hebert. And with that, we will now go to our round of questioning. For the first round, I will start with Mr. Baldinelli for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. Excuse me for that. I'm going to begin by going with Dr. Hewitt from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. Recently, we had Dr. Sad appear before this committee, Gad Sad, and he said this during his testimony: there has been an autocorrection of all this diversity, inclusion, and equity stuff in the United States. I see no autocorrection taking place in Canada. If anything, I see the doubling down of all this parasitic nonsense in Canada. Science is fully meritocratic, is a fully meritocratic thing. Nobody gives a darn or damn about your identity markers. The best people should be doing the best science, period. So would you agree with that statement or not?
I would agree with the last part of the statement. I also believe, if you'll allow me to say, that we believe that diversity brings all viewpoints to the table, which is useful for the advancement of science. And if those viewpoints are excluded, you're not going to get the best science.
And that's some of the comments that we've heard, too, talk about and touch upon things such as viewpoint diversity. And in your comments, you talked about excellence is not static, and the notion of applying that to all the merit review categories and how that is all taken place. Now, are the qualifications for that, in a sense, limiting by having some of these criteria in place that some viewpoint diversity may be excluded?
I would argue no, that in fact, we see better representation as a result of guidelines that we put in place. At the end of the day, nobody gets funded because they are a member of a particular group or identify with a particular group. They get funded on the basis of the excellence of their proposal as judged by a set of criteria that we make clear. from the outset and that conforms to international practice.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. We've also had some other professors come, for example, Harvard professor Steven Pinker, and he said in terms of research capability, Canada has the reputation now of being more woke than that of the United States. And in terms of losing scholars, and because of some of these EDI program and policies that are being put in place, that researchers do not feel welcome here, and then they look for opportunities south of the border instead of looking for research opportunities here. And how would you respond to that?
So I'd like to see the evidence that he had brought to bear with respect to the movement of researchers. I think Canada is a hugely attractive place. Positions are heavily subscribed. Our funding is heavily subscribed. Our funding rates are relatively low at 35%, sometimes 30% or even lower. So I just don't see that in the work that we do or in the results of the work that we fund.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Dr. Hebert from the Canadian Institute of Health Research. According to the EDI action in CIHR, in order to, quote, mitigate barriers faced by underrepresented groups, the first class average, or A-plus eligibility criterion, was removed from Canada Graduate Scholarships, the doctoral program. So how is this lowering of standards increasing research excellence?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. I would say in most of our programs currently, the issue is largely a very low success rate. We have exceptional research, and every single time we run a competition, we leave exceptional research on the table. So our biggest challenge is the lack of funds, and the lack of funds creates, I would suggest, very difficult competitive issues. In terms of the equity criteria, the way we're thinking this through is, one, it's important, as some of my other colleagues said. So let's just divide up what I mean, though. The first thing is equity matters in issues of health services and systems. It may matter less in terms of our approach in managing test tubes. So depending on the study and the issue of equity will be life-saving for people. As an example, the one reason we have right now why our hospitals are full is because of equity, largely. Our older adults, those who are lonely and isolated, end up and financially deprived, end up unable to go home. In fact, that's how I spent my day today. So from my perspective, equity matters because if we don't take care of some of those issues and we don't study them and understand them, depending on the studies we do, that's important. I would argue that our approach generally has been not so much cookie cutter, as you're suggesting, but rather problem focused. So depending on the issue we focus on, equity takes on a very important role.
No, I appreciate your comments and your statement about scientific discoveries will transform our lives. You also talk about limited finances, and we're talking about $4 billion is committed by the federal government to research excellence, and about $311 that goes to the research chairs. So those dollars that are being put towards this research are precious. And as this government goes through its budget ideas and this notion of spending less to invest more, they're going to be looking at all agencies with regards to their funding allocations. And so sometimes when we look at these issues such as EDI and their requirements, you're limiting the possibilities and the pool of the talent that is going to be able to do that type of hugely important research, I would suggest.
Sorry for interrupting. Time is up. Maybe you will get an opportunity in the second round to respond to that. And with that, we will now move to MP McKelvey for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Hebert, you mentioned collaboration for impact, so I was very excited to hear you mention that statement. So I just want to come back to the intent of this study has always been to undertake a study on the impact that various criteria for awarding federal funding have on research excellence in Canada. So in that spirit of collaboration, I was wondering if I could just quickly go to each of the agencies, if you could quickly just speak to how you are moving towards funding collaborative, interdisciplinary research. So that research that brings multiple groups together. One of my favorite examples of that is the microbiome of humans. You know, from a medical perspective, we largely looked at the 100 that could kill us. But we know if we bring in soil scientists that might be traditionally funded under NSERC, they have different tools and techniques that could be used. And certainly if you bring forward anthropologists and people that look at diets that might be funded under SHRC, you can really start to have real discovery and catalysts of real discovery. So I was wondering if I each could speak to how you're really evolving to fund that interdisciplinary science.
So I won't speak to the TIPS programs because there's a number of issues, programming that we do at the broader level. For our agencies, in the 1/3 of our funds that we use strategically, the approaches that we're starting to use are network support strategies. So you bring consortia or groups together to do exactly what you just said. For example, on issues of opioids, where, you know, the discovery of new forms of therapeutics might change our approach to addiction. Pandemics. Pandemics is a problem for all of us, and we're bringing together folks that are interested in all kinds of different aspects of that. Engineering and chemistry. I was at the UBC the other day, and I was like flabbergasted by what I saw. These chemists were just exploring new ways of tagging molecules, of designing drugs, and all the while they were testing their new approaches in rural BC. So they are making a transformation from thinking of how they work, working with physicians and systems in a way to transform our future. So that type of stuff is happening everywhere in our country. Our approach to doing that is to basically light it up and build together consortia of interests. But it comes from our community. Most of what we do is bottom up. So if the ecosystem is ready to move in a direction, we incentivize it in all kinds of different ways. That can be our projects, it could be our network thinking, but we can't do it alone. In health and healthcare, and a lot of what we do, the provinces have a huge role to play. They have to fund the scientists, the universities, and the hospitals who we support to do their work.
And maybe I'll just quickly see if NSERC and SHRC had anything to add to that, or I can move to the next question.
Sure, I can add quickly for the discussion. So to your point, that is interdisciplinary research is often the intersection of where very interesting science happens. And so beyond the chairs at the tri-agency programming, we do, of course, collaborate across the agencies across several specific calls. We do also encourage where there's at least 2 of the different disciplinary areas. We have a specific program for that. So if somebody's doing something that meets at the intersection of SHRC and CIHR, we're able to accommodate that on a smaller scale. And we have at NSERC, we have over 21 collaborations with other science-based departments and agencies. And so really wanting to connect that science that's happening in academia with the federal government.
And just to say, it was mentioned earlier, there's an investment of about $2 billion. So about a quarter of that, maybe a little more, is dedicated to interdisciplinary programming. Some of the extending back to the previous government, the Canada First Research Excellence Fund is a very large program each year, about $250 million, $300 million a year invested explicitly in interdisciplinary programming of large scale and import. We have our New Frontiers in Research Fund, which has as a mandate international research and interdisciplinary research at the cutting edge. And we work together as agencies. We developed a program in response to concerns of researchers over the years that, well, you know, how do I get funded if my work crosses agency boundaries? We've now created a program we call the TAPIR, which is a tri-agency interdisciplinary peer review program, where people can apply to any of our agencies, tick a box indicating this goes across agencies, and it gets put through a separate peer review mechanism. So we're working very hard to ensure those opportunities, in fact, are growing, not decreasing.
I would also suggest we have the same kind of frame of mind in our international programming. So what you're hearing is all of us work together in various ways, and we also have an approach to do this internationally.
So some time ago, when I was in the research world, NSERC had undertaken a Women in Science Summit that was looking at how to increase representation of women, especially at the higher ranks of science. And some of the changes that you made through that were having spots where you can indicate gaps in research, for example, so people could indicate parental leave, so it could benefit both men and women that are taking parental leave. So I'm just wondering, maybe, NSERC, if you could speak to how impactful that sort of was about making sure that the research pool is more inclusive and why that is important.
Yes, thank you for the question. And so we do, of course, we do have the chairs for women in science and engineering, and that's now been expanded to the chairs for science and inclusion in engineering and science. And that's very much to recognize the importance of still having, attention paid to specific groups where there can be underrepresentation. We know that science and engineering, especially engineering, is very low in terms of female participation. And so things like these practices, as you've mentioned, like supporting parental leave, allowing the engagement of researchers who have different circumstances in the research is extremely effective and important.
Thank you. Now we will proceed to Mr. Blanchet-Jonca. Please go ahead. You will have 6 minutes for
Merci,
your
Madame la
round of questions.
Présidente. Je salue les témoins qui sont avec nous
Thank you,
aujourd'hui.
Madam Chair. I'd like to welcome the witnesses today. Question for Ms. Thompson. You signed the San Francisco Agreement for DORA. Some of your programs, such as research or the guide of NSERC, to continue to talk about productivity and serve publications, citations, and professional or institutional procedure. So how do you see the contradiction between this?
But just to your point about DORA, this is very much about recognizing different elements of the contribution to research excellence. So in my opening remarks, I named a few. That could be citizen science, it can be the promulgation of technologies, patents, all kinds of different public engagement, this kind of thing.
Et 6 ans plus tard, en l'absence d'un véritable
6
plan
years
d'action,
later, without a true action plan to apply DORA, how can you say that you're judging researchers on this basis?
We provide examples of what is considered to be appropriate in research proposals for this purpose.
est-ce que vous avez des données à nous partager?
Do you have data to share with us? Have you measured the analysis of the application of DORA in committees?
Plan d'action?
Mr.
Conseil de-
Hewitt, do you have an action plan for SHRC? Does it exist for the San Francisco Declaration? Really, at this point, we're continuing to have discussions on the action plan with them. We have the Canadian Committee for Coordinating Research, and that will be a very important subject for the future. So the answer is no. In terms of CIHR, is there a plan to evaluate the San Francisco Declaration in assessment committees? At this point, I don't have the answer to this question. I'd like to have to get back to you. So 6 years later, we're hoping to get answers. Thank you. So your document says, ask researchers to show how their projects relate to EDI. Does not that affect scientific research to the detriment of academic freedom? So your criteria that are required for research funding, for equity, diversity, and inclusion, do you not find that this comes to orient scientific research according to ideological considerations to the detriment of academic freedom? I would say no, and we work with many points of view. We don't apply filters to that, and we fund the best research that exists at this point. And maybe I can pass the mic to Ms. Laflamme, who can answer from the tri-agency programs. I wanted to add something. The measures that are put in place in terms of EDI in programs, I'll be speaking about those that are managed by the 3 agencies. These are measures that have been put in place to attenuate systemic barriers that exist in the research system, which have nothing to do with excellence in research. And it's just to make sure that there is excellence in research that these measures are put in place, not to control the ideology, but to ensure that excellence in research is possible. So by putting these policies in place, the intention is to attenuate systemic barriers and biases that may exist to ensure that everyone has the possibility of participating in the research ecosystem, not as a function of their identity. So thank you. Many of your organisms have EDI criteria. It takes data to analyze the precision and the results of the application of this data. We know that SSHRC sent data on comparable things on their requests for grants. It's not the same for the other two agencies. So the only way to measure this is to have the data. So Ms. Thompson, Mr. Hébert, can you explain to me how a researcher who came here, Julien Larègue, who is doing research, cannot have access to this data? But it is the case for SSHRC. So I can say that we do publish the results of the competitions, and we're very transparent in terms of the equity groups which are funded, and I have given examples for the committees.
But we do publish dashboards with our results that are very clear.
Monsieur Hébert, des explications pourquoi on
Mr.
est...
Hébert, can you explain why we can't have data on research applications that are for public funds or taxpayers' money? So, which SSHRC can get, but the CIHR and NSERC can't do this for confidentiality reasons. So, like Ms. Thompson explained to you very clearly, it's the same thing for us. The results of our competitions are public. We publish statistics after all of the competitions, and the success rate, the problem is the success rate. Everyone is lacking funding because our success rates are 15 to 18%. So that isn't fair for anyone. That's the issue for us. So the big problem that we have is a lack of funding. Equity is successful, but the data is public. People who receive money that information is stated. And what we see with time is what we're beginning to observe is a very high uptake. All our young researchers represent minority groups, more than 70% of young researchers. So our issue is that we try and protect more and more money to ensure that our young researchers get money. So that's a problem for us. We can see diversity is increasing, and it represents Canada much better in our young people.
To MP Ho for 5 minutes. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is for Ms. Thompson. My apologies. What are your thoughts on DEI in the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council?
Well, rather than provide my personal thoughts, I'll provide you with some information about how we implement the policies and the practices. And so, as others have stated, we do consider having a wide variety of perspectives brought to the table and the strengthening of science through the consideration of EDI in research design. So to give a very quick example, there's been studies, for instance...
Forth by the government? Was this an initiative that the government has asked you to implement in your research council?
The priorities were identified by the government.
By the government, and then you were asked to carry it out. Okay. So you said a variety of perspectives as part of the mandate, and so do you agree that viewpoint diversity is important then? Like a diversity of viewpoints?
I won't state if I personally agree with it, but certainly our organization is carrying out the policies.
Right. So it falls under the gambit of what you described as perspective, a variety of perspective. So there was a study that was done, which is submitted as part of this committee, as part of this study, that 88% of all Canadian faculty in universities are left-leaning and 12% are right-leaning. Do you see an issue with that?
I won't comment on that personally.
Okay, but you just said we want to promote diversity.
We do.
So we viewpoints do. Or diversity of perspective.
Sure. And there is evidence, which I'm not a researcher myself, but there is evidence to the idea that considerations of EDI in science results in stronger science, and we've heard about usability of science and why that's important.
Do you think that if there was more representations of right-leaning views, that it wasn't 12%, it was a little higher than 12%, would that make the research better then in your case? Do you agree?
I can't comment on that, as other
But you
colleagues
just
have
said
said.
that you
It's-
want more diversity, and then now you're saying you can't comment on having more diversity.
Can't
is a
provide
good
my
thing.
personal opinion on it.
Okay, what does your organization think if
Well,
if
as colleagues have
viewpoint-
All
mentioned.
questions should be directed through the chair, and please, one person at a time, because it becomes a problem with the interpreters.
I'll rephrase the question. So, if there was more right-leaning views, would that sort of meet the objectives of? Do you agree that it would meet the objectives of the stated objective of your organization? for
It's always
diversity?
about the merit of the application and the excellence of the proposal.
All about merit, but then you said a diversity of viewpoints matter too. So how do you reconcile that?
Diversity of viewpoints matter in the research design and the usability of the science outcomes.
Okay, so I think we're hitting a wall here. So, my next question is for the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. So I'm looking at some of the funding of some of the research examples, and all of this research is funded by taxpayers, and all these positions are funded by taxpayers. So indirectly, it's accountable to the taxpayer, the Canadian taxpayer. And I'm seeing here there's a research project for the text complexity of German children's books for $75,000. I just want to see, like, how does that give value for taxpayers in Canada when we're facing a inflation crisis, a cost of living crisis, a border crisis, money that could be redirected to? How do we explain to Canadian taxpayers that is money well spent?
Well, as you said, it's public money, it's taxpayer money. And within Canada, there are diversity of viewpoints, a variety of interests. And as a federal agency, we look to
Study
fund those
German
interests.
children's books.
Madam
I
Chair?
mean, like, shouldn't the German government study this? Like, why are we studying this? How does that help Canadians?
It would be a great idea to bring the researcher here and ask the researcher
Well,
those
the
questions.
researchers are in the University of Calgary,
Yeah.
both of them. So they're Canadians. So why are we studying? Or they're based in Canada rather. Why are we studying this? Like, how does that provide value?
First off, that the research would be of excellent quality as deemed by peers, and I think it would be a great idea to bring the researcher here and ask the researcher those questions. It's very hard to tell from a title and a short description exactly what the research is and how it would
I'm
benefit
going to
Canada.
start with another one. I know my time is running out. There's another one, again, also social sciences, situated apathy, the politics of post-colonial climate apathy and artistic mobilization in Sri Lanka. It was granted in 2023 to applicants in McMaster University for $20,000. That's a lot of money. And how does that help taxpayers? Like, how do we explain to taxpayers when trust in public institutions are at an all-time low amongst Canadians that this is good value for money?
Here again, I think Canadians and Canadian researchers have a broad variety of interests, and it's our obligation to fund that broad variety of interests. And you should ask the researcher how that's important and how that in fact
Sorry, Mr. Ruhu, your
assists
time
Canada.
is up, and we will now proceed to MP Jessic. MP Jessic, you will have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for appearing. During the course of the study, I think it's been said many times that diversity in the design of the actual research project is very important. In terms of perhaps, Dr. Hebert, you will remember the days when a lot of medical research was only done on men, and therefore the implications were not seen in terms of perhaps women's results. So in terms of the design of the study, it seems to be important to have diversity. Ms. Thompson, perhaps you also talked about talent development and supporting new researchers. Are you following in any way what, when an application is successful and it has shown that there is a very diverse pool of talent within the research team, do you in any way follow them to see has it in fact developed their talent in a way that is useful on an ongoing basis?
So so if I can speak about our evaluation criteria, that's considered in the training plan. And what happens is we do ask the researcher to elaborate on processes or procedures or how they are building inclusive research training environments. And that is assessed by the peers in the committee. And then NSERC itself doesn't monitor what is happening in the research labs. However, when that researcher comes back for application for their next grant, their they have to share with their peers what they did with the previous grant, and that's where that would come out.
Dr. Hewitt, do you have a similar evaluation method?
We all do. All research funding programs are subject to evaluation. If there are, to some extent, with respect to the submission of applications, criteria that relate to equity, diversity, and inclusion, they would be assessed or evaluated, or if data are collected at that point, then that would be subject to evaluation, and the results of that would be published. And we have done that in the case of one or two programs already, such as the New Frontiers in Research program, which is actually a tri-agency program. I don't know if Madame Laflamme wants to speak to that, or just in terms of some very early indications we've had.
When we get the reports from the grantees for the New Frontiers in Research Fund, we do get results about outcomes. And what we see in the context of the exploration grants is that 67% of the respondents do say that the diversity of the research team has brought innovation in research and brought them to results that they initially did not expect. That's innovation, and we have those metrics.
So I am not surprised at all that you seem to be very much in favor of including EDI criteria in the assessment of the research projects that you look at. Just if I have a little more time, Madam Chair, Canada Research Chairs, apparently there are specific targets to ensure that women, those with disabilities, some other groups, Indigenous people, have the appropriate opportunity to move into those positions. Perhaps we could start with CIHR. Are you involved in any way with Canada Research Chairs?
Not in their evaluation, but we fund them. So the TIPS programs, the Canada Research Chairs programs, is run by my colleagues, actually, Madame Laflamme.
And this is a unique program in its formulation, as I've explained at committee before. This is mandated by a federal court order that was subject to a mediation run by the Canadian Human Rights Commission, following complaints that were made over a number of years about the fact this program was the least diverse of programming that we had funded previously. So Madame Laflamme runs this program, and she can certainly speak to that and how it operates.
Thank you. So EDI equity targets are one of the elements that are put in place based on the federal court order tied to the 2019 addendum. I'll just throw a few metrics here. When the program was launched, 14% of the chairholders were women, when in fact in academia you had more than 40% of the faculty that were women. We have that metrics because that's the only one that was gathered at the time, but what I can say is that the equity targets have contributed to ensure that the chairholders as a whole are representative of the Canadian population. But it goes far beyond the question of just ensuring that people have access to the program. There's also other measures that are put in place to ensure that the universities are providing equitable environments to ensure that the research can be done in a very good quality and environment.
Now we will proceed to Mr. Blanchet-Jonker for 2.5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I would like to file a notice of motion to make sure that my time will not be counted. So I'll read it right away. So, Madam Chair, so that our study on the impacts of the attribution of funding be credible and be effective, it's essential that the committee have access to complete disaggregated data. We observed that some councils refuse to publicize data to talk about inequalities in funding, be by language, discipline, or criteria such as diversity and inclusion. So the committee risks working in a blind way. We have to ask full transparency from these organizations, which manage thousands of dollars to see if this produces systemic bias or not. That's why I'm filing the this motion, that the committee requests the three funding councils, namely the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, as part of the study of the impact of federal funding allocation criteria on research excellence in Canada, to provide it with the disaggregated data of all submitted applications, whether funded or not, for all student and faculty funding programs from the master's level onward for applications made in 2004 for the year 2025. That this data include demographic data of applicants and collaborators, including applicants' responses to the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Questionnaire. Secondly, the institutions and departments of applicants, including the institutions of collaboration. 3, the language of the application. 4, all data regarding the type of application and project content, application year, grant program, discipline, title, summary, amount requested by the applicant, as well as 5, the identity of the evaluation committee, comments, opinions, scores assigned to applications for each criterion, and 6, the outcome of the application and the amount awarded. That the three funding councils submit all this data to the committee within 15 days following the adoption of this motion in an Excel spreadsheet format.
Notice or you?
C'est pour aller en débattre, Madame la Présidente. Et simplement spécifier qu'il y a une
I'm
correction.
presenting it to debate it, and there's a correction on the paper that I gave you. It's from 2020 to 2025. I could send it back to the clerk if you wish.
It's open for debate. Mr. MP Noor Mohammed.
Lots of questions that I wonder if we can get some clarity on in the construction of this motion. The motion says that the committee should get the demographic data of collaboration, including applicants' responses to the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion Questionnaire. I don't know that we can get, unless it's anonymized, the names of applicants and their specific responses. So if we can get some clarification as to whether or not we're looking for every single named applicant, like, so for example, Vincent Neil Holt, Talib Nur Mohammed, Maxime Blanchet-Jonca, like the names along with how they categorize. Is that what we're looking for here? Because I'm pretty sure I don't know that we have the right to get that under privacy legislation, but I would love some clarification on that point from my colleague.
MP Noor Mohammed, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, if you want to clarify that.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Listen, the objective is not to witch hunt or to know who applied. If it's a possibility to have anonymized data, and I want to say that this kind of data was already transmitted to researchers by SHRC. So we would like CIHR and NSERC. But they determined that this is confidential data, so it's too confidential to manage public funds to see what the results are.
MP Ho.
The names are already public, the applicants and the recipients of funding. So I mean, it's already public under the current database. So there's like, it's already out there. When you see the grants, you see who receives it. You see the names of the individuals. That's all.
All the questions should be through the chair.
Sorry.
Thank you. So my question is about, in particular, number 5, you say the identity of the evaluation committee, comments, opinions, scores assigned to each applicant or each criterion. And it's also for the ones that are both awarded and not awarded. So, some researchers that might have a proposal rejected, like they may not want that information out there. They may not want other people to go and get those ideas and use those ideas somewhere else. Like, there is privacy that is involved in that. Also, recognizing that when you sign up to be a peer reviewer, you are a volunteer. And I think we have to be somewhat respectful of the enormous contribution that the scientific and research community makes. And if we've actually put a dollar value on that time, that we're not paying these researchers to do this. So I'm just wondering, is your intent that the names of the evaluators are on there, and that the names of the proposals that aren't funded and those ideas are also released? Because I would find that very problematic.
MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Merci. Écoutez,
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I didn't invent that yesterday when I woke up. This is data that already exists in the databases of all funding, these 3 funding agencies. And one researcher came here, Julien Larègue, who filed a brief to say, for the members of the committee, said they didn't have it. He wants to analyze if there's inequity in the attribution of funding because of some criteria, and that's the study we're carrying out. And now we cannot carry out the analysis because we don't have a complete picture. We only have the data from SHRC. So I understand what you're saying, that these are volunteer peer assessors. So if we simply want to have a picture for the analysis, are there systemic inequities in the system of attribution of funding for research in Canada? And in order to carry out this analysis, we need the data. So we have a picture of one of the 3 granting agencies, and we need that data from the others to know if our study will allow us to make recommendations with a picture of the situation in all 3 funding organizations.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Is it possible for us to inquire of the tri-agencies present whether they in fact do have this type of data and how onerous it might be even to provide it, just in theory? It's 5 years worth of data, because it's 2020 to 2025, and within 15 days. So I just want to know about the possibility of it even being achievable. Could we hear from
Anyone would like to comment? Yes.
Honestly, I'd have to see the motion in detail and scrutinize, what we would have available. And we do have considerable information. We do have observers report from actual peer review meetings and so forth that we present to our own council, and that's available. So there are probably some things we could secure in other ways. But so I'd have to see the motion in terms of the full wording and to see exactly what elements could be secured or not.
Thank you. MP Baldinelli and... Okay, sorry. Dr. Habert.
I would agree with Dr. Hewitt. I might suggest that one of the things you might think through, rather than the data you want, are the questions, because we can do an analysis on certain questions depending on, and that's kind of what Ted was saying, depending on what you're asking, we can provide the data. So clarity on the questions rather than the database would be easier for us to manage, I would think. But if you want the database, we need to see the exact nature, and a lot of it's confidential. And we have a lot more than just numbers. We have a ton of qualitative information that may be useful depending on the questions you're asking.
Thank you, MP Baldinelli, and then MP Noor Mohammed.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure. I look to my colleague from the bloc for some guidance here, or on whether or not maybe we could continue on the discussion on this motion when we go into in camera and have a resolution there, or so that we could finish off our round of questionings and then we go into the in camera portion and we can discuss this motion probably as the first item of business.
We just have 3 minutes left for this panel, and we have some people on the speakers list. So we will come to you after MP Noor Mohammed. So we have a speaking order.
Yeah.
So I actually don't see any reason why it would not be interesting for us to dig into some of these questions. I guess the question, or into some of this data, I would be very curious to see some of all of this, actually, because I do think it provides us an interesting set of perspectives. What I want to try and do is 2 things. One is make sure that whatever comes out of this, isn't, just we have had a lot of questions today where witnesses tried to answer the question and give an example, and they've been cut off. And so let me be very, very clear. You're laughing, but that's exactly what you did. So anyways, Yeah, okay, great. So look, there's a few things. One is I think everything in here, if it's anonymized, I think it's really important for us to have, if it's 5 years worth of data, I think it'd be very, very insightful. I think our conservative friends might be surprised by what they actually get out the other side, as would our Bloc friends. I think it would be very interesting to get this information. How do we do this in a way that makes sure that the academic integrity of the people that are doing the work is not compromised, that the peer reviewers are not compromised, and we're not casting a Trump-like chill on academics that actually are trying to do good research. So if we can find a way to do that, I would be very, very supportive of making sure that we proceed with what my Bloc colleague has suggested, because I do think there is a lot of value in this. I also think it's important for us as members of this committee then to try on either side of this conversation not to weaponize whatever comes out the other side. I mean, if this is really for the purpose of getting to ground on doing some good work and making sure that we are doing right by the research dollars that are going in, I think that's a fantastic approach, and I think if the intention is good, I don't see any issues. I just want to make sure we work through the two questions that I've raised, and I wonder if my colleague from the Bloc has any views on that. But on principle, I think if I understand what he's trying to accomplish, I think that's reasonable.
Thank you. We will now proceed to MP Blanchet-Jonker.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Écoutez, je salue les
Thank you, Madam
interventions.
Chair. Welcome interventions of my colleagues, and I want to reassure people who are listening that we don't need the names of researchers. We just need the raw data, and then we carry out the analysis. And if there are issues after that, as a committee, we can look at that and make recommendations to the government to correct the situation.
Further debate, so we will proceed to the vote on this motion. Yeah, so if you can take the vote.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Sorry, give me 1 second. So I just want to say, we still don't have clarity on that point from my colleague, Mr.
We already have.
So, do we have confirmation that we're talking about everyone is anonymized, including the peer reviewers? Is that what we've agreed to? Because it's silent in this, and I just want to make sure we're voting on what we agree. So if
Mr. Blanchet-Jonker, quickly, so that we can proceed to the vote.
C'est exact. On n'a pas besoin d'avoir.
That's right. We don't need to have the name of people. The goal is not to try and make people careful. It's just know about the attribution of current funding criteria. Are there inequities in the system? That's all we're trying to find out.
Motion as presented by MP Blanchet-Jonker. The clerk will take the vote.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Oui.
Ms. Yasek.
Yes.
Ms. McKelvey.
Yes.
Mr. Rana.
Yes, please.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Yes.
Ms. De Ridder.
Yes.
Mr. Ho.
Yes.
Mr. Mahal.
Yes.
Monsieur Blanchet-Jonker.
Oui.
9 yeas, nil nays.
Thank you. The motion is adopted. So with that, this panel comes to an end, and I really want to thank all our witnesses today for coming for this meeting, and thank you for all the work which you have done, and thank you for your important testimony. Mr. Blanchet-Jonker.
So I just want to understand what's happening now, because I was starting my round of questions. So my time of question for my second round wasn't because I filed a motion, but usually the filed motion does not count as time.
Seconds.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Madame la Présidente. Alors, je
Thank you very
poursuis mes
much,
questions.
Madam Chair. So I'll continue my question for the witnesses with us. A question from Mr. Hébert.
Time. So we will be, will be the last round of questioning. At time is over. We have to then move to in-camera meeting for our committee business.
Well, I would suggest if we could, I mean, just the courtesy of the committee members to extend the hearing until
that will be up to all the members. If it is a unanimous decision to go into two other members, what is the will of the committee members? Mr. Mahal.
Madam Chair, you also mentioned that after Mr. Blanca, we would have 3 minutes more. So maybe.
They're giving the 3 minutes to Mr. Blanca.
No, after his minutes are done. Yes, yeah. So maybe you want to check.
Let us go ahead because it was a point of order. So we will go with Mr. Blanchet-Jonca and then we will go.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Une question
Thank you very
pour...
much, Madam Chair. A question for Mr. Hébert. So a study published in The Lancet in 2019 based on experimentation of CIHR revealed that when the evaluation talks about the experience of candidates rather than the scientific, the people are not evaluated fairly. Thank you for the question. I have difficulty understanding because in the end of the line, our criteria are criteria of excellence. So we look at the foundations of research, we looked at the innovative parts and the importance of the research, etc. Maybe I can answer the question in 2 ways. We carried out an important evaluation with the data and multivariate analyses. And what comes out of all our evaluations is that we still have difficulty ensuring that women are as well marked. There's still a bias that's clear in the evaluations. That's clear. You're right. But that bias is not very large. It's present. You'd be interested that this bias is not there for Francophone applications. So if you look at the data, one of the messages is that we have to be careful when we look at things. We have to make sure to compare apples with apples and oranges with oranges. When we do that with these multivariate analyses, what comes out is that, one, there are still remaining biases, and we're really trying to correct that. And two, biases in the male-female category is still a lot, but it's not huge. The biggest bias, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, I don't know if you know what it would be. I'll let you answer. It's the region of Canada. The biggest bias, if we look in an intersectorial way, it's the Atlantic provinces are left behind more than the others, and 2 parts of our country, Manitoba and Saskatchewan also. There are 2 parts to this. There's a geographic element in our data which interests us very much, and we want to see how to respond to this. So I'm interested, and I'm Acadian, so it really does interest me. And I hear.
This panel comes to an end, and we will suspend the meeting so that we can go in camera and go with the meeting. So the meeting is suspended.
Point of order. I like to. Point of order.
you